Some quotes do not sound like headlines at first, but inside a locker room, they can turn into warnings. When Mike Elston says he wants to be the best defensive line coach in the world, I do not hear soft humility. I hear a warning shot for AFC offenses. And today, things heat up because the Chargers are also being linked to a possible move for a veteran receiver. They are hiding a tough battle deep in the backfield, and they have one underrated name ready to explode on offense. Subscribe and let's get into it. Now here's the part a lot of outsiders ignore, but inside a serious franchise, it can change the ceiling of an entire season. Position coaching. Mike Elston did not step in front of the microphones trying to sell a character. He did not try to act like the most important guy in the room. He did not put on some fake ambition show. He said he is focused on being the best defensive line coach he can be, that he wants to be the best in the world at coaching defensive line, and that he is committed to that craft. Man, that is exactly what Chargers fans want to hear after watching this team have talent, have moments, have flashes, but still need a tougher identity up front on defense. And with Elston, this is not just a nice quote to clip and move on from. He earned Jim Harbaugh's trust at Michigan, followed Harbaugh to Los Angeles, and since he walked into that building, the defensive line has not looked like a random group of big bodies. It looks like a unit being built. A veteran who needed new life? He helped. A young player who needed detail, hands, angles, leverage, discipline? He got into that process. This is the kind of coach who does not show up in fantasy football, but he shows up when the opposing quarterback feels pressure in the first quarter and finishes the game looking sideways before the snap. Here is the aggressive read. The Chargers gave Elston first-round material to work with. Akeem Mesidor is not coming in just to be another rotation name while everybody waits around patiently. He is stepping into a room where the coach talks like an obsessed craftsman, and that changes the expectation. If Elston can really speed up his development curve, Los Angeles can turn a defensive need into a real impact weapon in 2026. And there is more going on behind the scenes here. When Elston makes it clear he wants to stay on this path with Harbaugh, Chargers fans should celebrate, but they also should not be naive. Good coaches rise. Good units get noticed. Chris O'Leary returned as defensive coordinator, but if this defense starts biting into the schedule, interviews will start coming. And if Harbaugh ever loses another coordinator, Elston feels exactly like the internal name who already understands the culture, the standard, and the kind of punch this project wants to put on the field. He also talked about details like Tart lining up wider and the possibility of more rotational packages on the line. That is not some throwaway footnote. That is Harbaugh football with new tools, more angles, fresher legs, more pressure without apologizing for it. The real question is not whether Elston is committed. He clearly is. The question is whether this defensive line is about to drag the Chargers into that level that separates a competitive team from a feared one. And once the defensive line starts looking more dangerous, the pressure moves to the other side of the ball. How far can Justin Herbert go if the Chargers put more real firepower into this receiver room? That is where Brandon Aiyuk shows up as the kind of possibility that makes half the fan base sit up straight and the other half start calculating draft picks, contract, knee, depth chart, and his role in Mike McDaniel's offense. Gary Davenport from Bleacher Report named Los Angeles as an underrated potential trade partner with the San Francisco 49ers. And that read does not come out of nowhere. The Chargers have invested heavily at wide receiver in recent years. Quentin Johnston in the first round in 2023, Ladd McConkey in the second round in 2024, and Tre Harris in the second round in 2025. That is not a small investment. The issue is, investment alone does not win snaps. Production has to follow. The offense has to scare people, and Herbert cannot live forever in a world where everybody talks about potential, but the opposing defense still feels comfortable deciding who to double, where to pressure, and where to take chances. Before the ACL and MCL injury in the middle of the 2024 season, Aiyuk was a 1,000-yard receiver, twice over that mark, and a second-team All-Pro in 2023. That resume matters. If he is close to that player, the fit with McDaniel is nasty on paper. Separation, intermediate routes, outside threat, the intelligence to attack space, and the ability to be that outside complement who frees up McConkey inside. That is exactly the kind of weapon that forces defenses to stop playing the Chargers like everything is predictable. Now, nobody here is acting like there is no cost. Aiyuk is coming off a major injury. He has had tension in San Francisco, and any trade would involve draft capital. But that is exactly why this gets interesting. If the price is not high, if a later pick really gets into the conversation, Hortiz at least has to listen. Because there is a difference between chasing a big name out of desperation and attacking a value window when the market cracks open. And this possibility also puts internal pressure on the room, in the right way. Quentin Johnston had 735 yards and 8 touchdowns in 2025, even while missing 3 games. That is not failure, no matter how badly some people want to crush him because of the first-round label. McConkey dropped in catches and yards in year 2, had some issues with drops, but also dealt with a passing game slowed down by bad offensive line play. Tre Harris had 30 catches for 324 yards as a rookie and showed blocking ability, but now he has to turn physical presence into a consistent threat. If a veteran like Aiyuk ever arrives, it would not just be reinforcement. It would be a message. Nobody has a guaranteed chair just because they were drafted high. McDaniel wants processing speed, multiplicity, separation, blocking, depth, all of it together. And if the Chargers can add a healthy Aiyuk to Herbert, McConkey, Johnston, Harris, and this new offensive structure, the offense stops asking for respect and starts taking it by force. But not every important piece of news comes with a siren, a massive trade, or a Pro Bowl name attached to it. Sometimes the serious stuff behind the scenes is buried deep on the roster, in the place casual fans barely look until an injury hits on Sunday afternoon and everybody asks, "Who is going in now?" And the Chargers know that pain. In 2025, the running back room was pushed to the limit, with injuries hitting every original back on the 53-man roster. So when Los Angeles goes through the 2026 draft without taking a running back, but adds Keaton Mitchell in free agency, and still brings in Gregory Desrosiers Jr. as an undrafted free agent, I see less randomness and more smart insurance. Desrosiers does not have an easy road. Let's say it straight. Omarion Hampton, Kimani Vidal, Keaton Mitchell, Jared Patterson, and Amar Johnson are already on this 90-man roster. For him to make the 53, it would take a pretty heavy mix of performance, need, and opportunity. But that is exactly why this kind of player matters in camp. Because he is not just fighting names, he is fighting for a role. And that role makes sense. Desrosiers came out of Memphis as a sixth-year senior, well-built physically, measuring 5 feet 10 and a quarter, 202 pounds. This is not the flashy back who tries to turn every play into a highlight and ruins the design of the run. He is patient, smart, a one-cut runner, breaks tackles, and takes the right gain when the defense gives him 5 or 6 yards. For a Mike McDaniel offense expected to use more zone and wide zone, that speaks directly to the playbook. In 2025, 86% of his runs came in zone concepts. That is not a decorative detail. That is compatibility. What catches my eye is his 0.303 missed tackles forced rate in 2025, even while getting hit behind the line a lot. So this was not always a running back getting clean lanes and pumping up numbers. He had to create dirty yards. He had to survive ugly contact. And he also showed value catching the ball. 33 receptions, 232 yards, and a touchdown. For a practice squad candidate, that matters. And then there is the return angle. Desrosiers returned kicks at UMass and Memphis, and the Chargers have kept backup returners on the practice squad before. So his real path may not be beating the entire running back room. It may be convincing the staff he can be safe, useful, scheme-friendly, and ready to come up when chaos hits. I want to hear the fan base on this one. Would you save a practice squad spot for Desrosiers because of the versatility? Or is the current depth already closing that door? And this is where the Chargers picture gets more dangerous for anyone only looking at the surface. Everybody is going to talk about the rookies. Akeem Messidor, Jake Slaughter, Genesis Smith, Nick Barrett, Brennan Thompson. All of them carry a real part of this roster's reset. Oronde Gadsden II will get attention too, and he should, because he had 49 catches, 664 yards, and 3 touchdowns as a rookie. And even with David Njoku in the building, he still looks like a major middle-of-the-field weapon for Herbert. But there is another name flying low under the national radar, almost hidden in the corner of the room, and I am not buying that silence. Tre Harris. Harris was a second-round pick in 2025, coming out of Ole Miss with a WR2 profile, short area ability, strength at the catch point, and the ability to attack the field on vertical routes. In his final college season, he had 60 catches, 1,030 yards, and 7 touchdowns. That is not a background player resume, but his rookie year in Los Angeles was quiet. 49% of the offensive snaps, 30 catches, 324 yards in 17 games. For some people, that becomes a quick label. For me, it creates a better question. Did the offense really put Harris where he can hurt people? Because one thing he already put on tape is physical effort. His blocking stood out throughout the season, and that matters way more than people think. In a Mike McDaniel offense, a receiver who blocks is not decoration. He is part of the engine. He is the guy who helps turn a lateral run into an explosive gain, sets the edge, sells action, and keeps the coordinator comfortable leaving him on the field. And when you stay on the field, the ball starts finding you. His average yards before the catch in 2025 was 6.2, a pretty ordinary number for someone who could be used in a more aggressive way. If McDaniel unlocks Harris as a vertical threat, a contested catch target, a physical receiver working down the field, Then the story changes. Because with McConkey drawing attention, Njoku and Gadsden working the middle, Johnston demanding respect in the scoring area, and maybe even more competition arriving outside, Harris can attack defenses exactly where they get vulnerable, when they think he is only the fourth problem. That is the kind of breakout that does not make noise in May, but shows up in September like it was obvious the whole time. And if Harris becomes a legitimate receiving threat in 2026, the Chargers offense gets a piece that changes the math play by play. He does not need to be the cover star right away. He needs to be that secondary nightmare who punishes single coverage, wins contested balls, and makes defenses pay for every wrong choice. In the end, this is the point the Chargers are screaming without even raising their voice. This roster is not sitting still. Elston wants a defensive line with an elite mindset. The Aiyuk possibility shows Los Angeles could still look for heavy ammunition for Herbert. Desrosiers represents that hidden roster fight that protects the team when the season tries to break the plan. And Tre Harris could be the piece that turns depth into a real threat. That is the difference between building a roster and building pressure. If you want to track every Chargers move with real heat and no nonsense, subscribe to the channel. Bolt up!